Okay, Fitz. So first off, you're muted. Secondly, the S Zone just came out, like we said 10 minutes ago to start the show. What are we talking about in the S Zone this week? Give us a preview of what people can learn over at bluewhiteillustrated.com if they subscribe.
We are talking about finishing off the 2025 class. Quincy Porter, Ohio State wide receiver commit, was at Penn State over the weekend. I didn't expect that. I usually have a pretty good idea of even when flip targets are coming in, and we balance that line. But when I was there after the game and James Franklin's hugging Quincy Porter, that's a bit of a surprise, and I love surprises. It's so much fun covering recruiting when there's surprises to be had, good surprises at least. So Quincy Porter on campus, wrote about him today. Wrote about the ongoing Brandon Finney saga as that continues to play itself out. He's still committed to Oregon. Penn State's still certainly heavily involved there. Michigan's still involved as well. Definitely checking that out. But really just recapping the weekend that was. It's been a busy couple of weeks for Penn State's recruiting staff, about 150 each weekend, each of the last 2 weekends, highly dense in terms of targets. I know Ryan Snyder has done a phenomenal job compiling those lists over the last couple of weeks. Those guys could probably use a nap. I'm not going to lie. It's been a busy weekend. Now, as we said, going up to the last 2 weeks is that noon kick against Ohio State gave you an opportunity to showcase, sort of the peak atmosphere. Even though it was a noon kick, this weekend probably gave you a little bit more chance to recruit. Like that's kind of the silver lining there with the 8 o'clock kick. Actually, the 8 o'clock kicked great. There's no need for linings or anything like that. Yeah. You get a chance to be around these kids, to actually recruit them, to have them get some questions answered. So it's almost more not like a junior day, but like it's a more informal visit than showing up at 8:30 for a noon kick where the team arrives
just and being processed, right?
Like it's a meat market for a noon kick. You got to get them in certain spots. Then afterwards, maybe you get a little bit of time to hang out. But for the most part, this is an opportunity to showcase more of the big picture, the tailgating picture. I thought the fields were awesome on Saturday. We were out there for a while. I don't know that I've ever tailgated when it's dark before. You think about Penn State has its night games. It's usually September, and it usually gets dark around 8:30 or something like that. So that was a different experience. It got colder than I expected, but that's neither here nor there. There's a lot of people that had a lot of things that help them deal with the cold. Can't do that.
You had to go work
before we're going to work. Yeah, you're absolutely right. But you look at the visitor list, it was great. You had Zion Ali, the number 1 overall prospect on three's class of 2026 rankings, defensive end from Maryland. That has been a long-time top target. There's a guy that came to camp this summer, which I think is it's a good indicator if he's actually putting in the work to figure out if he's a fit in terms of system, in terms of coaching style with Deion Barnes. And that's a positive sign, I will say. That's going to be a tough one because Oregon's in there. Ohio State's in there. Tennessee just came in. Texas A&M just came in. Auburn just came in. There's a bit of a theme there. He had a top 5 and he stepped back from that top 5. Penn State was in that top 5, and I still think they're in the mix. It's going to be a tough one for Zion. He's a heck of a football player. Maybe distance comes into play here, but Oregon, I think, is leading the way. And it's leading the way on 3 RPM right now as well. Kendra Harrison, another 5-star prospect in the class of 2026, led a merry band of tight ends that were essentially in the top 10 or 15 of the On3 industry rankings. I mean, it was kind of ridiculous in terms of the density of talent in that tight end group. So it's kind of by design, but it's more about, hey, Ty Howell's going to go out there and pitch to these guys. Come to the whiteout. We're going to have time you're going to have time to get in. You're going to have time to actually see the campus. You're going to have time to do all this stuff, and you're going to have time to travel. And that's a big deal for guys that are coming in from Iowa, Kansas. I think it was just all over the place. So yes, there's a little bit of luck in getting all those guys there, but at the same time, it's kind of by design. So the tight end group from top to bottom, I mean, as good of a position group, and you would expect that given how Penn State's recruited tight end, but as good of a position group as we've seen on one of these weekends for a long, long time. It was just kind of stupid how that all came together. So credit to Ty Howell for getting those guys onto campus. A couple of picks after the weekend. Steve Wilfong put in some picks. Caden Gebhardt, linebacker safety hybrid from Ohio, former teammate of Ethan Grunkmeyer. He's a really, really good player. He came to camp this summer as a safety. Penn State worked him out as a linebacker. I think he kind of fits that Lion Sam mold that we've seen, kind of like the Dom DeLuca role that we've seen there. Probably more linebacker at this point. He's about 6'1", maybe 200 pounds right now. So he's kind of in that hybrid role, but a really good football player. He tested really well as well. You see, he's a 4-star. He's top 247 guy by 24/7 Sports. And then Carter Scruggs, offensive lineman from Virginia. He's a 4-star, I think, on every network. I'm sure you'll pull that one up. But he's been a guy that's been on the radar for a while. Big kid, 6'5", 270. He's got really good length for an interior prospect, and Penn State had him in camp, so they liked him as well. So things coming out of that. That was just a couple picks from Steve there. And I think there's more to come. I think Penn State positioned themselves really well for some really good prospects. So coming out of the next few weeks, I don't know that this is the time of year where you see a rush of commitments, but I think you see some trickle out in addition to what we've already seen.
I was going to say, I wouldn't say it's a rush of commitments, but there have been a couple this weekend already, which is what we're going to end here with. And let's start with the one we haven't talked about yet, which is Layton von Brandt, committed to the program. Another one of these that I love, Fitz, that happens like 20 minutes before kickoff. I found out about it after the game because I was locked in on what we were doing. But again, 2027. And I know how you feel about 2027, especially for offensive linemen, but this one feels like a big commitment for Penn State 2 years out with a top interior offensive lineman committing to the program.
Yeah, he's a big kid. He's been sort of ahead of the curve in the class of 2027. And, when you're looking at the region in that cycle, and it's way too early. Like, let's not get all hung up on all these things right now. But you look at him and you look at Maxwell Hiller and you say, these are guys that Penn State needs to get. And they've gotten one of them already. We weren't really looking for a commitment coming into the weekend. As I've said on the board, like, you're not looking for 2027s right now. Penn State's not really pushing hard for 2027s right now, and that's not saying that they didn't want him on board, but like they understand the gravity of the situation here. These are sophomores in high school that have a long way to go in their high school career, and we will see what happens. But now Penn State's got two commits in the class of 2027 with Layton von Brandt and Keemon Spell.
Can I jump in here?
What's that?
Can I just jump in here 1 second talking about it's interesting to me looking at the way that this has kind of worked out with guys committing 2 years early. You have example on both sides, Alex Birchmeyer, who has I think struggled a little bit out of the start of his career, and then you've got Cooper Cousins. Both these guys committed very early in the cycle, and Cooper Cousins has come into rave reviews and was able to play early in his career. A little bit less so recently, but I think we might see him here over the next couple of weeks. But I think it speaks to your point of even if you feel confident that it's a good football player, you don't know how this is going to go with offensive linemen, especially when they commit so young, because the development curve is big for players like that. And I guess I'm just curious where you think, specifically with Von Brandt, what you see of him now, not asking is he going to be a success or not, but, does he have the earmarkers of a guy who develops on the path that you think?
I don't know. I want to see more just because of how young he is. I mean, he's pushing 6'6", 250 as a sophomore in high school. He's got the length. He's got the athleticism that sort of checks out with all those other guys that we've talked about. So, like, you feel good in the data. It's a long way from playing on a college field, though. And I know he's number 60 in the country, and Keemon Spell is, I think, number 13 in the industry rankings in the country. So 2 top 100 guys right away. But there's a long way to go, and and that's not a slight on Layton or anything like that. But it's a process, and grabbing guys early. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I don't think there's a rhyme or reason to this. Penn State had Jalen Matthews committed very early as well. They've had Matthias Mega Barnwell committed early as well, and those guys unfortunately didn't work out. Actually, the first 4 commitments in the class of 2025, if I'm going by memory here. You got Matthews, you got the safety from Jersey, you got DJ McClary, the running back from Arkansas,
Barker.
as well, Barker. None of those guys panned out, and that's unfortunately, that's kind of like something you have to talk about, the double-edged sword of this thing. So,
Sure.
But I like Von Brandt. I think he's going to be a good player. I think he's one of those guys that fits as an interior prospect that has tackle ability and has tackle size and length and things like that. And that's what you want. You always want the tackle size. You want the tackle athleticism. You want all this stuff to be tackles. And if you can make them guards, that makes your entire line offense, your entire offensive line better.
Yeah, especially if they can start at guard and you have that position versatility. Some of the examples of other places where you get really talented freshmen and maybe it's a little easier to play as a guard to start. And like an Anthony Donko, I think he did a similar thing before moving to tackle this past year. Last thing we have here is what we talked about yesterday with Ryan Snyder on our video. You can check out the breaking news video of Chaz Coleman, but I wanted to get your thoughts on Coleman in the class of 2025, getting a player here in the final stretch run in the final month before National Signing Day, the importance you think, your opinion on him, and who he is as a football player.
We talk about the data, and we don't have the hard data on him because he didn't come to camp at Penn State or anything like that. But you look at the explosiveness that he shows on the football field, on the basketball court, all this stuff, and that's the kind of thing that Penn State covets. You look at those rankings that are up there on the screen right now. The industry has him as a 3-star, number 599 overall. We have him as a 4-star, number 213 overall. That is a gulf, especially this late in the process. This is a guy that really stepped up in the last year. Ryan Snyder had an interview with his coach. I do suggest you check that out. It's very enlightening in terms of how this process went. But he's a quarterback / defensive end. You don't see a ton of them, but you look at just the raw explosiveness, and this kid's got it. And it's really going to be interesting to see how all this comes together. It kind of reminds me of Malachi Williams, a little bit bigger than Malachi, but he's got a ton of rawness to his game, but a ton of explosion, and that's what you're looking for, especially when you take a look at this group of edge rushers that Penn State has. I think Jaden Woods a little bit closer to playing than a lot of freshmen would be at 6'3", 225, he's going to be probably 240 by the time he gets going. But like, some of these guys are ready to play. I don't think Chaz Coleman is quite there, but you see the upside. So a nice little mix in Deion Barnes' class. And you got to remember, Max Granville is kind of part of this class as well. And he's already on campus doing some good things. So a very different scenario than we've seen, in the John Scott years. Deion Barnes a little bit more aggressive there, and they've done a nice job. I know that Kentucky wanted him. I know that Ole Miss wanted him bad. Like, there's some SEC in Chaz Coleman, even though he's from by the way, much closer than I thought. 2 hours and 56 minutes per Google, and I thought he was further than that because he's in Ohio. So so not far down the road. But I like what I've seen from Chaz Coleman. Again, I think it's going to take a couple of years before he sort of figure that kind of stuff out. But that kind of explosion off the edge, you really can't teach, and that's why our guys, Cody Belair, Charles Powers, really like this kid.
Yeah, explosion plus size, I think, is the thing where you've got guys that are explosive and they're twitchy, and they're maybe a little bit undersized, and that's Penn State is able to, carve a lane with those guys. But the ones that are almost 6'5", with the length, with all of the physical markers of a first-round defensive end in the NFL draft, and that's why I'm so excited about his abilities. Is I see all of those markers. That's huge.